This is TWiT.
Yet another throwback gaming mascot is getting the HD treatment, and joining us to see if it's worthy of your time is Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica. How's it going, Sam?
Good afternoon. It's going very well. And yeah, Crash Bandicoot is coming back really soon. And it wasn't necessarily the highlight of my E3 trip in Los Angeles last week. I was actually about to skip the meeting about it because, yeah, it's a better looking Crash Bandicoot. But I went, and not only did the team tell me they have a new playable character, but more interestingly to me, they talked about how they had to rebuild the game entirely from scratch.
So yeah, so what is the process there? I mean, in situations like this, normally, how does it differ from the what they went through in order to bring this remaster?
Well, it's interesting because in talking about it, people aren't sure whether to call it a remaster or a remake or what the heck you call it, because it's taking the exact original designs of the first three Crash Bandicoot games, which came out on PlayStation 1 back in the mid to late 90s, and has a lot of the stuff has been rebuilt. None of the code transferred from the original, because the original Naughty Dog games, those are the guys who've gone on to make a series like Uncharted, they really tweaked the original PlayStation to do things it wasn't supposed to do. It's a lot of really wonky stuff that involves hiding triangles, that sort of specific polygonal 90s coding stuff, using assembly language to get it all working. So that stuff didn't really transfer in the very few hard drives that were transferred. In fact, a lot of the original hard drive data didn't come through, either because Naughty Dog did not hand it over to the current corporate handlers at Activision, or it just didn't transfer and work. So these guys went and got what are known as meshes. So essentially all of the architecture of the old 3D worlds is back in drawn over, and they had to redo all the animations, all of the textures, all of the art, all of the timings. So like exactly how Crash jumps and how that jump is different in each of the three first games. Stuff like how he rolls through crates, it all had to be kind of eyeballed and redone. It's sort of incredible. They actually went to online fan forums like GameFAQs, FAQs, to just kind of cheat and see what fans analyzed and saw. And there was another part where one of the guys at Vicarious Visions, that's the team that's working on this remake/remaster, admitted that he went to a panel discussion that was hosted by a former Naughty Dog programmer and just remembered that explanation of how they got it to work in order to get all these sort of timings right. So a lot more work went into it than I actually assumed.
And I guess the big question is whether it justifies all of that time. I mean, some games you understand immediately, like, oh man, that was a fantastic game. I had Crash Bandicoot, but I can't say it was at the top of my list. I know people loved it, but I don't know. Was it worthy of all that time?
Well, Crash Bandicoot was an interesting chunk of that 3D platforming era, and at the time, Super Mario 64 was the big dog.
Yes.
Everyone was amazed at exactly how it translated to 3D and how it was fully 3D. Crash Bandicoot didn't have that analog stick. That was a big deal at the time, and so the programmers sort of worked within that framework of what a PlayStation could do, both its polygon power and its controller. And I think over time, I've come to appreciate it more for having this very specific segue from the 2D platforming of old to 3D platforming. I don't think it's the same as Super Mario 64, but I do think it stands the test of time. It was very cleverly animated. A lot of love went into it. And yeah, when you look at it and go, yeah, the guys who made Uncharted did this, that makes sense from both a polish level and a programming level. I think it's worth trying out again, and it's going to be $40 for three big games, which I've seen worse values, especially from a company like Activision. So good on them for making this work.
Now, what do you think about this whole retro gaming with consoles and games? Like, it just seems to, are we seeing more retro games than we're seeing new games? And how do you feel about that?
Well, there have been a lot of remasters, remakes. I know Sega just came out with a whole free with ads app system that lets you play old games. And I think there's a difference between the companies who are just trying to cash in and the companies who are doing it right. I think game archival and game preservation are these things that don't always get done. Sometimes a hard drive gets thrown out and that's it. Final Fantasy VII is one of the more famous examples of a game where every time they rebuild it, they have to redo it from scratch because a lot of the original assets were made for systems that were older and not archived right. I just want this to be a reminder. If you do anything in the world of software, be that a boring accounting app or a beautiful, weird indie game, put a hard drive in deep freeze with some sort of tool that we can use in the future to bring it back, because you have no idea how valuable that might be. I think old data preservation is huge. We love that at Ars Technica.